Wow, it's so nice to be here. What a buzz here this morning. It's great to see old friends. The Zilster boys are here, Ray and Bob. My mom came to Christ soon after I did. I came to Christ a junior in college at Central Washington, and this church adopted me. And Russ Fuller brought me here. He went to the Christian Reform, but he said the girls were cuter over here, so we should come. And so we came over on a Sunday evening, and the rest is history. So, but Mignon Zilster, Bob's wife, became my mom's best friend in those early days of her Christian faith, and I'm really thankful for her and for all this church has given to my family. There's other old friends here. I think John King was here. John and Tammy are here. I have to apologize to John. I made a joke once about him. I said, John's like a father figure to me. And, John's not old enough to be my dad, okay? 10 years, you can't have a child when you're 10 years old. And so, anyway, he's only 10 years older than I am. Tammy is one of the most, hardworking persons I've ever met. They say that Rome wasn't built in a day, but that's because Tammy wasn't the foreman. And so she's here this morning too. And Dan and Donna are here. Dan and Donna took me on when I joined Campus Crusade for Christ almost 50 years ago. And so it was kind of scary when I first came here and saw Dan and Donna because I only knew them from high school when I was a sophomore and they were seniors. And in the high school, there was just this little wide place in the hall that was the senior lounge. And if you were a sophomore, it's kind of scary watching through there because there were seniors. I remember it was Bill Sherwood, Steve Pichelle, and Dan Wrenches. And they were just looking for some unsuspecting sophomore to humiliate. And so Dan was a fearful person. And I thought he never smiled. He's always looked. But he smiles a lot now. He loves the Lord. And you could say our project in Central Asia, that I'm going to talk about, began with this church because Donna Wrenches came with a group of students from here. Donna, I can't even remember what year it was. It was either 92 or 93. We went into this, the Soviet Union had just fallen, and we did a project in St. Petersburg with some young people from this church, and it was kind of the launch of our Soviet Union Muslim Jewish ministry that we've had. So it's kind of bittersweet. Today, my mom passed away that Mignon poured into many years ago. About 10 days ago, we had a memorial service for her yesterday in Linden. And I came back early from Uzbekistan. My brother Glenn was also a long-term member of this church and started Youth Dynamics in Oak Harbor. And my little brother Glenn led me to Christ. Back in 1975, he came to Christ first, and I saw a change in his life, and he shared the gospel with me. And that changed everything. And so we're at my mom's bedside, and she was not conscious anymore. And we were just reminiscing, and I've been reading Psalm 90 since that day, and it talks about this. It says, and this was written by Moses, so this was 3,500 years ago, this poem was written. And it says, you turn man back into dust, saying, return, O children of men, for 1,000 years in your sight are like yesterday when it passes by, like a watch in the night. You have swept them away like a flood, and they fall asleep. And everybody here is going to fall asleep one day. And my mom fell asleep 10 days ago. And I remember just this month, my mom saying she still felt like she was 18 years old, and I think we all feel that way. I'm 71 now, and so, the days of our life are 70 years, or if by strength, 80 years. But they're quickly gone, and we fly away. And so life is short. We want to make it count. We want to make it count for something eternal. And Moses says in the psalm, he says, teach us to number our days that we may present to you a heart of wisdom. And so we're about eternal things in the church of Jesus Christ. In Isaiah it says, voices call out, and he said, what shall I call out? All flesh is grass, and all its loveliness is like the flower of the field. The grass withers, the flower fades when the breath of the Lord blows upon it. Surely the people are grass. The grass withers and the flower fades, but the word of our God stands forever. So we're about eternal things. There's only two things that will last forever: men and women's souls and God and his word. And so that's what we're about. That's what you're about. And so that's what we're here to talk a little bit about today. I've got a map here we'll put up of Central Asia where we're working. Margie and I have been there for 2.5 years. Margie's not here. Last year at this time, I spoke, and my wife wasn't with me because her mother was passing away. Her mother was 95 years old. She went into eternity last summer, and my mom this summer. And so my wife is with family right now. But we've been in Central Asia for 2.5 years. But we started working there really back with Donna in the early 90s. I actually went to the Soviet Union for the first time in 1986. And so we were in Russia for 12 years. We were in Israel for 11 years, and we've been in Central Asia. But it's all working generally with Muslims from the Russian-speaking world. That's been our ministry. So Central Asia, you can see it here. We're in Uzbekistan. Uzbekistan's in the middle. It's the pinkish red country. Tashkent is the biggest city in Central Asia. It's right there in the center. Uzbekistan is about the size of California, so that can give you some perspective. Kazakhstan to the north is 2.5 Texases. And Uzbekistan has almost the exact same population of California with one difference. Uzbekistan is growing by 800,000 people a year, and people are fleeing California for Texas or, Idaho, places like that. So it's growing, and I was made by a miracle of God vice president of the largest university in Central Asia 2 years ago. So I won't even go into that story because it's long, but I met the Minister of Education, and I brought some students to his university, which he founded in 2017. And as a result of that, he asked me to be vice president because he saw that I could get young people to come and professors, and so that's my job, and that's why I'm there. And so we have this open door. If you go on campus at Portland State University, people don't want to take a selfie with you. If you're a Christian, they might avoid you. But everybody wants English language there. They want Americans. They're friendly with America. That's just been for the last few years. They have a new president. And so we have this wide open door. And so I have 9 young people working with Margie and I, teaching, studying, and sharing the gospel with Uzbeks and Kazakhs and Tatars and Tajiks. And it's the greatest thing in the world. And it's great because this is God's ultimate plan for the world. We're all a part of the Great Commission. And I want to look at 3 passages in the Old Testament, which are conversations between the Father and the Son. There's not very many of these in the Bible. In fact, in the New Testament, there's John 17, Jesus, really the Lord's Prayer, his high priestly prayer. On the cross, Jesus addresses the Father. He says, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do. And he says, into your hands I commit my spirit. And then he says something from Psalm 22 that we'll look at in a minute. But in Psalm 2, we have one of these conversations. It's very brief, but verse 7 says, I will surely proclaim or tell of the decree of the Lord. Okay, so someone's going to tell about what God has decreed here. Who is it? Then he says, he said to me. Okay, who said to who? He said to me, you are my son. Today I have begotten you. So the Father is speaking to the Son. He said, you are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I'll surely give the nations as your inheritance, the ends of the earth as your possession. All nations, ends of the earth. So hold on to that thought. That picture that we just saw of the map, that's the ends of the earth. It's halfway around the world from here. It was shut off from the world for 1,400 years by various barriers, the biggest one being geographical barriers. Central Asia has two deserts in the north, the Kizilkum, the Karakum, the Black Sands and the Red Sands. On the north, there's the Tian Shan Mountains. On the east, there's the Pamirs. On the south, there's the Hindu Kush. And then there's Islam, which came to dominate this region in the 700s of the years after Christ. And so it was cut off because of that. You couldn't even get there. Even when there were railroads in the early 20th century, the Soviet Union, this was part of the Soviet Union, the world's first Marxist atheist state where no missionaries were allowed. So it's cut off for all these barriers. And now those barriers, most of them are gone. They've been obliterated. In 3 weeks, I'm going to get on a plane. I'm going to fly from Seattle to Istanbul. I'll be 5 hours there. I'll probably get a triple tall, non-fat caramel macchiato at the airport, and then get on a plane, 12 hours to Istanbul, and then 5 hours to Tashkent. 17 hours with a little bit of a break and a little bit of Starbucks, and you're there. Those geographical barriers have been obliterated. And then there's political barriers. This was 70 years of atheism. I made my first trip to the Soviet Union in 1986, and in my first week there, I met a guy on the street who spoke some English. And he explained to me that he said, yeah, here in our country, we have scientific atheism taught in high school and at the universities, and you have to go to these classes. And then he paused. I'll never forget what he said. He goes, for someone who doesn't exist, we spend a lot of time talking about him. And it's true. And so those barriers are gone because the Soviet Union fell. And there's, geographic barriers, political barriers, and then there's religious barriers. And this is the biggest one because this is Islam. This has been part of the Islamic world since the early 700s after Christ. And we worked with Muslims since 1995. There's a bunch of stans there. There's 3 other stans in Russia. Don't worry, there won't be a quiz afterwards. I might ask you for one of them, so try to remember one of the stans. But there's 3 stans in Russia: Bashkortostan, Tatarstan, and Dagestan. Margie and I moved to Bashkortostan in 1995 with our kids. Bashkortostan stan just means place in Old Persian, and it came into the Russian language. So Bashkortostan is the place of the Bashkirs. The Bashkirs are the northernmost Muslim people in the world, and that's where we worked and learned Russian. In the Soviet Union, you had your native language, and then you had to know Russian. So everybody knows Russian. But it's a bit like the Roman Empire, where there were all these different languages, but everybody had to know Greek. Everybody knew Greek. So through the Greek language, you could reach the whole empire. And it's the same here. So we're in Bashkortostan, and I still remember the first student I shared with in Bashkortostan. His name was Batir Bikbulatov, and I had listened to Dark Side of the Moon when I was a student. It came out in 1973, and part of my I went through this depression in college before I came to Christ, and part of it was because of Dark Side of the Moon, and they had songs like "Breathe," and it goes like this: "Breathe, breathe in the air. Don't be afraid to care. Leave, but don't leave me. Look around, find your own ground. For long you'll live, and high you'll fly, and smiles you'll give, and tears you'll cry. And all you touch and all you see is all your life will ever be." See, life is just physical sensations, chemical reactions, and then it's over. That's all there is. There's no God. Everything is meaningless. And then second, the last stanza was, "Run, rabbit, run, dig that hole, forget the sun." And then at last, when the work is done, don't sit down. It's time to dig another one. Because there's no God, work is meaningless. Every job is just digging a hole because there's no ultimate purpose to it. And when you finish that, you go dig another hole. Run, rabbit, run, dig that hole, forget the sun. And then at last, when the work is done, don't sit down. It's time to dig another one. For long you'll live and high you'll fly, but only if you ride the tide. And balanced on the biggest wave, you'll race towards an early grave. And that's it. Life is meaningless. I'm in Bashkortostan, and I met Batir Bikbulatov in his dorm room. And my Russian was not great, but I had learned questions, and I knew how to explain the gospel in Russian. And I asked him, "What's the most influential book you've ever read?" And he went over to his bookshelf and he pulled off a book. And I'm thinking, maybe it's the Quran, he's a Muslim, maybe it's Tolstoy or Dostoevsky, Russia's great writers. And he came over and gave it to me, and it was the complete works of Pink Floyd in English and Russian. And so American culture has gone all over the world. Now, that was in 1995. Now with the internet and smartphones, it's all over the world. And so a lot of these cultural barriers have been broken down because there is an international culture. But Islam is the hardest barrier. Islamic countries are the last frontiers of the gospel. And when we lived way over on the far left of that picture, there's the Caspian Sea, and just to the left of the Caspian Sea is Dagestan. And Dagestan is, there are a lot of different people groups. There are no Dags in Dagestan. All the other stans are, Tajikistan is Tajiks, Uzbekistan is Uzbeks, Bashkortostan is Bashkirs. Dagestan, there's no Dags or Dags in Dagestan, but there's Avars, Kumiks, Lezgins, Dargins, Chechens, Tabasaran. The Chechens are the most resistant. We lived there from 2003 to 2007. And so we worked with Chechens. I met my first Chechens in 1995. They're the most fanatical of all those groups about Islam. And I got to share with these two young guys. I met them on a campus that I was scouting out to see if we could send a team there. And these guys were kind of following us around, and I went over and introduced. They could see I was a foreigner, and they were curious. And so I met them, Suleiman and Ruslan. And so I asked them to come to my hotel that night, and they came, and we had a great evening talking about Chechnya, their language, their culture. And I got a chance to share with them about Jesus Christ and about how he changed my life. And I'll never forget what the guy said to me. Suleiman said to me, "Мы чеченцы, мы мусульмане. Никто туда не пошел к Иисусу. И не пойдет. Мы чеченцы." It translates, we're Chechens. We're Muslims. No one has ever gone that way, the way of Jesus. No one ever will. We're Chechens. And this is the barrier in Islamic countries, that their ethnic identity, being a Chechen or a Tatar or an Uzbek, is tied to Islam. And so in their mind, if they quit becoming a Muslim and follow Christ, they're not a Chechen or an Uzbek anymore, and so they're not going to do that. No way, because they're very proud of their heritage. And of course, it's a lie. It's a lie. But it's one of these obstacles, and only the message, the good news about Jesus Christ. For I'm not ashamed of the gospel, because it's what? The power of God for salvation to anyone or to everyone who believes. And so Chechens came to Christ, and Uzbeks are coming to Christ, and Tatars and Tajiks. So we're planning a church in Tashkent. It's First Reformed Church of Oak Harbor in Central Asia, because you guys are funding us. Did you know that? You've been funding me since 1976. I'm kind of nervous sometimes that Dan and Donna will come to me one time and say, "Hey, we want a refund for 2002. My wife always tells people that are supporting us, and we don't have many churches. It's Oak Harbor, it's our church in Portland, and she always says to people, supporting us is not a life sentence. You can stop when you need to. So that's my message to you. You can stop when you need to. But we're there because people like you give and pray for us. So we're planting a church there. We have Tashkent Bible Church. It's the only Bible church in Uzbekistan. And there's a lot of small churches, but often it's a business for the pastor. A lot of the churches are, I would say, they're prosperity gospel and hyper-charismatic and teaching young people how to prophesy and do all kinds of stuff. And so at the university where I work at, they've never met the kids there. There's 20,000 students. I got an office right in the middle of the campus. I have the best office. I have a better office in the campus than the president of the university. And these Tatars and Uzbeks and Tajiks, they've never met a Christian before, and so they get to meet our students, and they want to talk to them because they're Americans. They want to practice English, and they get to hear about Jesus Christ. And so it's just a fantastic opportunity. So, ends of the earth, all nations. That's Psalm 2. Second, is it Psalm 22 next? Psalm 22 is next, and This is one of Jesus' words on the cross. You know it. Eli, Eli, lama azavtani. That's Hebrew. In the New Testament, it's in Aramaic, which is very close. Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. My God, why have you forsaken me? The Son is talking to the Father, and he's asking a question. Why is he asking this question? Does he not know why he's on the cross? No, whenever God asks a question, he's asking it for us. In the garden, when God said, Adam, where are you? It's not because he didn't know where Adam was. It's because he wanted to draw Adam's attention to what he had done. My God, why have you forsaken me? And in I think it's verse 11, he says, be not far from me, for trouble is near, and there is no one to help. The Son of God was alone on the cross. Later in that psalm, he said, dogs have surrounded me, a band of evildoers have encompassed me. They cast lots for my clothing. 1,000 years before the crucifixion, before the cross, it was written what would happen there. And then he says, they have pierced my hands and feet. But the end of the psalm is worship, because the Son says to the Father, all the ends of the earth will remember and call out to the Lord, and all the families of the nations will bow down before him. For the kingdom belongs to the Lord, and he rules over the nations. Ends of the earth, all nations. And then the last conversation is just Isaiah 49:6. I'll just look at one verse. But 1 through 6 is, he said to me, but I said, but he said. And then this is what the Father says to the Son in verse 6. He says to me, it's too small of a thing that you should be my servant to bring back the tribes of Jacob and to restore the preserved ones of Israel. I will make you a light to the nations so that my salvation might reach to the ends of the earth. Light to the nations, ends of the earth. So we're going to Islamic unreached people groups. Why are they unreached? Because they're hard to reach. This is the last frontier of the gospel. And if someone doesn't go from a culture that has a church, that has the gospel, they're not going to know Christ. And it says in Romans, everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. But how will they call upon him in whom they have not believed? And how will they believe in him whom they have not heard? And how will they hear unless someone tells them? And how will someone tell them unless they are sent? And so we've been sent. This is very few people are called. Most people are called to serve Christ where they grew up. That's the norm. And that's why you all are here. You're doing the Great Commission in Oak Harbor. It's very important. There are no easy mission fields in the world today. I've been on Portland State University campus. That's not an easy place to work. It's actually easier at Tashkent State. People want to talk to me there. I walk across the campus with one of our kids, and I'll show his picture, and then I'll wrap it up here. They want to take a selfie with us. No one at PSU ever wanted to take a selfie with us. There's a Christian guy, look out. He might want to talk to you about Jesus, be careful. They want a selfie. We're all over Instagram. The owner of the university is using us to promote his university. 4 of our students are on billboards all over Uzbekistan promoting this private university. I was driving through the desert in western Uzbekistan, going to Namangan, the 3rd largest city where we have a branch of our university, and there's a poster out in the middle of the desert with 4 of our students saying, come to this university. It's crazy. 2 things then to close with. I got 2 pictures. One is of Rashid Garatovich Kadyrov. Rashid's the pastor of our church. Rashid's Uzbek. Rashid speaks Uzbek, Tajik, Russian, and his English is not bad. He's my best friend there, and he's our pastor. I can't be a pastor there. You can't have a foreign pastor. But Rashid is the pastor of Tashkent Bible Church. Rashid came to Christ in 1998. His daughter had been tragically killed in an auto accident in the village that he lived in near Samarkand. And in his grief, he looked for comfort And he went to the Quran because he was a Muslim. And he said, Rod, I found no comfort there. But he did find a verse that said, if you want to, you'll never be stable in your life unless you put the Torah, the Old Testament, and the Injil in front of you. He didn't even know what they were. What's the Old Testament? What's the New Testament? And some of his friends, he was in a little criminal gang, they had robbed a place, and they found a Gideon's Bible. And they brought it to Rashid because he had learned to pray in Arabic. He was a serious religious guy. And they gave Rashid this Gideon New Testament in Russian. And Rashid met Jesus Christ reading the Gospels in 1998 all by himself. It's a long story. It's a great story. So Rashid's our pastor. He loves the Word. And he's the one that's making it happen there. We started with 11 people. It was our team, Rashid and his wife and his daughter, and one other student. Easter Sunday, we had 70 people there. We baptized 7 young people in May who come to Christ. 2 Tatars, 3 Uzbeks, 1 Armenian, and 1 Kharezm. And I'll show you his picture now as I wrap it up. Okay, this is, and in the middle is Beknioz. Beknioz is from Khiva. It's the capital of this ancient empire called Kharezm. He speaks Kharezm, Uzbek, Russian, and English. He's the president of the student body of the university there. He came to Christ a year ago. He got baptized in May, and he's a great kid. He's 22 years old. He was my assistant for the last half of this year, and it was really fun after he came to Christ. And on the right is Chuka Mekam. Chuka was born in Portland. His parents are from Nigeria. They're Igbo, but they came to the United States when they were young. Chuka played Division I basketball at Drexel University in Philadelphia. He played on the junior college team that was national champions. He's the best basketball player in Uzbekistan. And he came to Christ a few years ago. I met him a few years ago. I met him, and he had come to Christ kind of on his own. And we met together last 2 summers ago. And this year he came to be on our team. And he's one of the most gifted young evangelists just in terms of making friends and sharing his faith that I've ever met with. We had an evangelistic meeting in May with a coach of a soccer team in Tashkent who's also an Uzbek who's come to Christ, and he's in our church. It's like having the coach of, we used to have the Seattle Supersonics or the Portland Trailblazers in your church, the head coach. It's a big deal. So we invited all these kids to come and hear his testimony. We had 30 guys there. 23 of them were invited by Chuka. And so pray for Chuka. He's a great kid. He's making it happen there. And so this is our project. It's a long-term project. 70 years, or if by strength, 80. So I'm 71. As a friend of mine said, you're living on borrowed time. I'm praying for 5 more years. My mom's 93. You know, if I live to be 93, I got a ways to go, but we don't know how long we have. In that verse, it said, he swept them away like a flood. They fell asleep. You all know that there was a flood in Texas, last month. It was a Christian camp. 2 8-year-old girls went there to learn about Jesus. They were swept away like a flood. Nicole, 18 years old, one of the counselors, she went to counsel there. She was swept away, not like a flood, but in a flood. Richard Eastland, 72 years old, the director of that camp, was swept away in a flood. Our life can be over just like that. So I want to make it count. So pray for us that we can continue this project, that we can get as many young people through this little window of opportunity into Central Asia that we can train and care for in the next few years. We'd love to have a young person from First Reformed Church. So we got a long-term project, Matthew. It doesn't have to be this year. 2 years, 3 years, we'll still be there by the grace of God, so we want you to come. So thank you so much for your support. Thank you for the privilege of being here. I'll hang around a bit afterwards. I'm going to have lunch with Dan and Donna. Matthew, thank you so much. Yes, I'm going to pray. Lord, should I do the benediction now, or is it? Okay. Lord, thank you so much for First Reformed Church. Thank you for Matthew and his family. Thank you for some of the people I mentioned. Thank you for the Burleys I see out there, and the Zylstras and the Kingmas and the Wrenches. And it's terrible to start naming names because you won't include everybody, the Rips. Lord, there's faithful people here who are part of the Great Commission. I pray you'd bless their ministry here greatly. And I thank you that we can have a foothold in the darkest parts of the world because people here pray and give, and I'm so thankful for that. And I pray you'd bless them for their contribution. Thank you for the time we have here this morning. In Jesus' name, amen.